So one of the key principles that startups embrace is experimentality. And what that really means is that you don't have a track record when you're launching a company. You're essentially feeling your way through it. And so the only way to know what's going to work is to constantly experiment, to sort of come up with an idea or something you want to test, you have a hypothesis, and then you push it out to your user base, to your potential audience, and you get some feedback, and then you revamp. And then you do it again and again. And as an individual, we sometimes think that we should just have an idea and do it, and because it sounds right, because theoretically it seems like it will work, then that's what we should stick to. But really, we should give ourselves permission to experiment, not just when we're young, or not just when we're starting something out, but all the time. That keeps things fresh, and it keeps what we're doing current. It makes sure that you really are keeping in touch with your audience, with yourself, with sort of the heart of whatever it is that you're working on. So experimentation is really key. The other thing that I think as individuals that we take for granted, but that startups do really well, is disrupting your own assumptions and disrupting your own mental models. What that means is that we're often taught sort of subliminally that things are a certain way, or we have these little sayings that we will pass down culturally or within families, or we'll live by example. And so we start to think that just because something always has been one way, that it always will be or should be. And what startups know is that even large industries can be disrupted if you start to think about them a little bit differently. If you start to sort of create a hack, as they say, that will allow you to do something better and different. And so once you start disrupting your own mental models, you open up so many doors that can lead down paths or can allow you to operate in a different way that can really breed a lot of happiness and a lot of connection that you otherwise might have been closed to. So the third one is really important, and maybe even the one that you hear about the most in relationship to startups, and that is failure. In Silicon Valley, there's even a fail con. There's a convention that celebrates failure, if you can believe it. So within the startup community, failure becomes a sort of badge of honor, not just because you failed, but because of what that failure permits you to do. And that's to learn and to grow. Because the idea is, if you haven't failed, you haven't learned, you haven't been tested. And so it's not just that we should set ourselves up for failure, but rather that we should push ourselves, that we should push the limits and the boundaries of what we think might be possible, so that we are going beyond what our current limitations are. And even if we fail, we're able to learn from it. So the failure in and of itself doesn't make us great, but the conscious, mindful reflection that we engage in after the failure, whether it's the first failure, the 10th failure, the 50th failure, each time you refine your approach, you refine who you are, what you want, and what it is that you're trying to push out to the world. And so that failure really becomes a sort of training. And if you're able to harness that power, you can be so much stronger in the long run than if you hit it right from the beginning. The fourth startup principle that I think individuals can really benefit from is maybe my favorite, and that is the art of the hustle. You might hear some entrepreneurs talk about how they're hustling, and we often have sort of a negative connotation with that word, but really I think more of us could use a little bit more of it in our everyday lives. Sometimes we think that if we just follow the set parameters, or again, do what's always been done or what's been told to us, that if you do this, then this will happen to you, we sometimes forget that there's that extra little X factor that can be hustling. And hustling is also a really great way to bypass pedigree. So you may not be born into greatness or wealth, but you can overcome that and you can compete against people who have, if you're willing to put in a little bit extra effort. So remember that a bit more hustle can actually help you to rise above whatever circumstances you were born into.